Thank you all so much for joining us today for Financial Literacy for Families. This is our last session for this semester of our finance series, and we do plan to resume this in the fall. So please keep an eye on communications that you receive from Alumni Relations about upcoming sessions when we come back for the fall semester. My name is Michelle Camardella, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Relations at PACE. I have a few housekeeping tips for you. You are muted upon entry, and we ask that you remain muted while the presentation is going on so that we don't have any disruptions. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to enter them into the chat box, and we'll address as many questions as possible at the end of the session. Also, I just wanted to note that we are recording this session. We do plan to send it out afterwards, and it will be posted on our website in a few weeks. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Gina Tesla. Gina is a Director of Global Supplier Management at Microsoft, which includes leading the global team responsible for over 1,500 suppliers in 80 countries. She spent 14 years at IBM, including serving as VP Corporate Social Responsibility. Before joining IBM, Gina served as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Panama, working in community economic development. She holds an MBA from the Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University and received her bachelor's degree at PACE's Pleasantville campus. Gina currently serves on PACE's Alumni Engagement Committee. So with that, I'll pass it to Gina.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and it's great to see all the names popping up here and terrific to see the participation. This is a topic that's very much near and dear to my heart as also a parent of two children who are 11. They're both 11. I have a son and a daughter. And, it's amazing for anybody who has kids just to see how fast the years creep up. And at 11, I kind of always have a little bit of that consideration. I won't call it guilt, which it probably is, but consideration of, am I doing enough in terms of helping to build their financial literacy? And as I started reading and learning more about how best to teach my children, it was really great because it brought up even more questions. And I'm so thrilled today to be able to moderate this discussion for us to listen and learn and discuss a little bit more about what is it that we can do to provide financial literacy for our children. And in particular, I will also say, as I was thinking about this topic and discussing it, I was thinking about also sort of the difference between daughters and sons, and how in some cases, and the statistics unfortunately bear this out, that girls just seem to they just don't receive the same level of education and financial literacy. That's a little bit about why I thought this would be a terrific conversation, and I hope that you will too. And with that said, I have the great honor of introducing our panelists today. So to give you some context, I'd like to introduce Barbara Mauter, PhD, a tenured professor in the psychology department at Pace University in New York City. She's also the director of the Parent-Child Institute at Pace University. Her research is focused on parents, parent-child relationships, and child development outcomes. Most recently, she's been working with her research group on the Working with Parents manual, a 10-session program to assist parents in attaining their parenting goals and raising children during difficult and not so difficult times. So Barbara, it's such a pleasure to have you here today, and I've enjoyed all that I've learned from you in our prep sessions, and I'm happy to pass it to you to warm welcome and can't wait to hear more from you.
Thank you. This has been such a pleasure to contemplate and then put together this presentation. And I'm going to put up a PowerPoint through the screen share, and let's see. So this is the briefest of overall views on such an important topic. And of course, I'm more into the parenting aspect of it, but financial literacy goes hand in glove with parenting. So just briefly, I'll try not to speak too quickly, but within my allotted 5 to 6 minutes. Of course, kids are wonderful. They're just extraordinary and unique in and of themselves. And parents are children's first teachers, and according to some psychologists, absolutely the most important. And I wouldn't deny that myself. Well, why is parenting important? It's related to children's academic achievement, cognitive development, educational dropout rates. You can predict with 70% accuracy by age 3. Misbehavior, social emotional adjustment, social skills, and so much more. So in other words, parents' behaviors influence children's behaviors. It's true with children's learning. They observe, they tend to imitate what they see and hear. But every child is different. Parenting two children, even within the same family, even if the same age, may be somewhat different. Children's developmental needs definitely drive parenting behaviors. So how do parents teach financial literacy? And here we have some darling children to look at. Well, the parent development theory tells us that parenting differs in terms of the importance of some behaviors from the time a baby is an infant to being toddler to elementary school age, adolescence, late adolescence, and even adults. And I have 2 adult age children myself. I'm still the parent, but the importance of my parent roles has changed over time. So this is just a cute kind of design showing that children are at different developmental levels. Obviously, you're not going to teach something very complex to an infant toddler, but preschool age can pretty much start on that. So the importance of different parenting.
Barbara, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your presentation. We just see your, it just says launch meeting and it's got your Outlook tab. We don't actually see your slides.
Oh no, oh no.
So you might just need to stop screen sharing, pull up the presentation on your own screen and then reshare again.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No.
We were all kind of waiting to see it happen and it.
Oh, so is this showing now?
You'll need to reshare.
Okay.
More Zoom fun. Yay.
Yes. Sorry about that.
It's always something, I feel like.
Yeah, isn't it? Okay.
There we go. Yes, now we can see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I hate to start from the beginning, but I'm sorry you didn't see those darling children. So I'll just go through this quickly to get to where we were. So how do you teach financial literacy? Well, again, it's very important the age of the child. You're not going to be talking compound interests at infancy or a preschool level. And here are those 7 characteristics, again, just with education highlighted. It's not like it's the most important characteristic, but that is part of the parenting role. This graph is just for all of us who love graphs. And this is very interesting because you can see these different parenting role characteristics mapped out over a child's lifetime. So just a quick one where the first on the abscissa is the infant toddler, then preschool aged, elementary school aged, adolescent, late adolescent, and adult. And you can see these various lines, intersecting and ultimately becoming less important, that is the parenting behaviors over time. And so this would be parenting a la an adult aged child. And here you can look at just this thin green line here. This represents education. That is the teaching that a parent does to and for a child. So it's not like taking children to elementary school or high school and dropping them off. This is really what you're informing them and talking about. So you can see from this graph, the most important times for learning literacy having to do with children would be really the preschool level, if I can get this, preschool, elementary school age, and adolescent. After that, yes, it's still important during late adolescence and adult age children, but not as important as these key times. I'm just talking about education and working with your children. So with regard to financial literacy, start early. So with infants and toddlers, you can start by classifying blocks, colors, and so forth, and looking at shapes. With pre-K children, you might focus again on classifications, learning numbers, grouping, sorting, beginning to appreciate coins and money, although young children have very little sense of one-to-one correspondence. That comes more with an elementary school age child, where they can learn to, of course, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. They have the capacity. Here I've got this nice photo of a dollar bill and then 100 pennies. They can understand that equivalent, but they're very concrete in terms of thinkers. So elementary school age, they really don't have a good grasp on past, present, and future. They tend to be very concrete, very much focused on more the present than anything else. It's really when you get to the adolescence that you get children that are able to think on a more abstract level. They can think in terms of the past, present, and future. They can understand abstract concepts and constructs such as earning, spending, borrowing, budgeting, saving, investing. They can do that. They've got the cognitive skills where those things really make sense. So they can set financial goals. They can understand the compound interest, and they can see what money means on into the future. So parenting and financial literacy go hand in hand, not unlike parenting and nutrition, and also parenting and screen time. These are all opportunities for teaching children. So I thank you. That's my brief overview, and I look forward to talking with you on this topic some more.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I think it's fantastic to start a bit with the fundamentals and things like just even teaching, you know, the different values of coins and things are important. I know that it's done in school, but they actually don't always absorb it really or have the chance to practice. So I think that's sort of, as a parent, where I try to take on that responsibility, since everything is so digital these days, to try to give those opportunities to have to buy something in a store and understand the change, or if we're in a store sort of and we're looking at one item versus another, trying to calculate which one's worth, you know, has the best value. So I think those are really, really fundamental. Well, thanks. So now we'll move on to our next panelist, who is Stacia Morris. So thank you so much for joining us. Stacia is the author of Teen Money 101 and Teen Money 102, and founder of Your Life Track. She works to be a catalyst for improving the quality of life for women and families worldwide, with a focus on financial literacy, financial and health wellness, coaching, and mentoring. She also holds certificates for and currently works as a financial advisor. Stacia received both her post-MBA certificate in accounting and her MBA from Pace University in New York City, and her BA from the University of West Indies. Stacia, thank you so much for joining, and we'd love to hear a little bit about some of your ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gina. And Barbara has really set the stage for me. So Barbara, thank you very much. I don't have to go through the age-based what you should teach kids at various ages. So I didn't prepare a PowerPoint. Michelle and the other people who I know who are listening in here know that I talk for about 45 minutes and I've only been given 6 to 7 minutes here. So I thank you, Barbara. You set the stage. I'm just now going to comment. And to comment on the importance of financial literacy, I want to just share with you what the UN says about financial literacy in terms of poverty and breaking poverty. Apparently, the UN has 17 strategic development goals worldwide. And they say that if we're financially literate, we can solve 9 of those 17 strategic development goals. They go on to say that there's a high level of poverty, which we know, particularly in the development countries, and we've seen it in the US also. And we also know that we can eliminate poverty if we teach financial literacy, and we can also achieve equality. And as Gina says, there's a difference between the knowledge of and practice of financial literacy between males and females. In my household, and when I wrote the book Teen Money 101, it was the opposite. My nephew spent and his sister lent. So that was just an anomaly, but it's usually 70% of women do not understand financial literacy. I agree with you, Gina, that it has to be taught at home, because enough schools are not teaching financial literacy. We grew up, my siblings and I grew up with a father who was a headmaster. We learned a lot. You went through my education background. Where was my financial literacy? I became financially literate when I knew I was financially literate, but not financially well. So we have a difference between literacy and wellness. To bring this out and to change the vicious circle of poverty, I want to just give you a quick story. I mentored a young lady in one of my corporate jobs. She desperately needed mentoring. She mentored her. It wasn't until years later, as a financial advisor, I met with her aunt. And her aunt told me that everything I taught this young lady in terms of saving, credit, etc., she had taught her aunt, who was around the same age range as her. The aunt was now ready to buy a house. She had been doing 3 jobs in the Stamford, Norwalk, Bridgeport area. She had enough money to buy a house. So when she came to me and told me, I was surprised that so we see the ripple effect and the breakage of the bondage of poverty when we can teach financial literacy to youths. This lady was a young lady with a bachelor's degree, starting her job, her career, and she taught her auntie. And her aunt has daughters, twin daughters. So we see the ripple effect and the reason why we need to teach financial literacy, particularly if we're going to break the bonds of poverty, and especially in minority communities. So that's one thing I want to talk about, how teaching financial literacy fits not only into your home life and making your children's lives better, etc. It fits into the community. And the last thing I want to talk about this lady is that she is today a database web security analyst. Look at the timing. This lady can charge whatever she wants to charge. Recently, she had 2 jobs and gets paid nicely. And she's almost finished paying off for her house before she's 40. So let's just put this in context of how financial literacy really impacts us and the next generations to come. The other thing I want to mention is to involve your children in planning. Don't let them hear you talk to your siblings or your husband or your significant other. Don't let them hear you talk with a sense of urgency and panic without involving them every monthly or as you plan. Please involve them. Another story. My siblings and I helped to send my last sibling to University of Notre Dame. Once, we are saying we couldn't afford to fly her back. She went to Notre Dame, Indiana. We live in Connecticut. We couldn't afford to fly her back for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Then my nephew at 9 years old decided he was going to go to a local college so that I or his aunt, not his mother, but the worker bees, I and his uncle would pick him up and bring him home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. He went to Boston College. So it's a good thing he talks and we heard what was in his little mind. Sometimes you don't know what your kids are going through, what they're thinking, how scared they are. Don't wait until we have problems with the home, losing the car, losing our jobs, or whatever. Just consistently, and as Barbara said, the different ages where you would involve your kids. I'm going to recommend, my third thing is be the martyr. Have meetings, you have a budget, manage your cash flow, manage your credit. And a tip is have your kids, especially if they're teenagers, have them involved when you set up your budget and give them the authority monthly on a rotating basis to manage that budget. Manage your spending so they understand before they get to the age where they have to manage their own, they understand that their parents are managing their budgets. I think I may have talked for my time there, but if you have questions or want to hear more, please let me know. But those are my tips.
Thank you. That was perfect in terms of timing. I'm going to ask a question. I would also encourage everybody to please put your questions in the chat. We will certainly get to as many questions as we can. Before we get to those, I will ask a question. So picking up on that whole idea about responsibility and, for example, your idea of having sort of this rotating responsibility for budgeting, I think that's really fascinating. Love that idea. I would like to ask both of you a question about allowances. I was reading a book that's called The Opposite of Spoiled by Ron Lieber, and he presents an idea in the book that I've been trying, somewhat provocative, I think, in the sense that allowance should be given purely as a financial learning tool. That is, it shouldn't be connected to particular activities or chores. And I know many parents, my husband included, who would really bristle at that and say, that's nuts. We're just going to pay them for living in the house. And the idea is that they're learning about the money gets divided into spend, save, and give. And those are 3 different categories that they are consistently looking at. I'd love to pose this question to you. Do you believe, and Barbara, I'll give you the chance to answer first, what's your philosophy on this whole concept of, should children receive an allowance? If so, should it be tied to particular activities? Should you penalize them and not give them their allowance if they aren't doing certain things? Just sort of conceptually, I would love to hear from both of you about this whole idea of allowances.
Well, I think one can look at allowances a lot of different ways. And I think one thing to keep in mind, if one is considering giving an allowance, is what is the goal of having that allowance? Is it to teach responsibility about money? Is it to tie compensation to doing work? And any of those things are completely legitimate. I think along the way, a lot of, and Stasia, you were really pointing this out, and I would underscore it as well, is talking with your children about money and what money does and how you can save, how you can accrue money. I have one daughter, and she had an allowance, and it was very specifically tied to certain activities. And my second daughter didn't really want an allowance. I offered her an allowance at the same age I had my older daughter. She said, no, I don't really want an allowance, but I really would. She was about 12 or 13 at that time. I'd really like to invest in mutual funds. Well, I had no idea. I still don't know where that idea came from, but that's what I did, was under the Uniform Gift to Minors Act, is to put $50 a month into a number of different funds. And that was, of course, long ago and far away now, but that was really, and she appreciated that. It's not like she followed it, but that was what she wanted to do with money. So it depends on what your who your child is and what you're communicating to your child. But I think speaking with your child a lot, I think, and Stacia is quite right, about purchases, that you know, what do you want, what do you need, are all things to think about in conjunction with allowances.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Barbara. Stacy, I'm wondering what your thoughts are here.
So, Gina, we go back to our childhood. In my childhood, we had no allowances. Maybe my siblings and I can know. The sister siblings, we had chores. The girls, and we typical, a lot of Caribbean and minorities, the girls had chores. The guys played soccer, you know, so we never got allowances. We got whatever we needed. We would ask our parents would give us money, but it wasn't tied to anything, because the guys would have gotten zero if it was tied to any kind of chores. I believe in tying an allowance to chores, not just giving money like that. Tying allowances to chores and making sure that they do their chores. Clean the house, clean their bedrooms, wash the dishes, whatever. But I believe in tying allowances to chores. If you could afford to, and you give the kids allowances, then you go into the spend, save, invest, you know, buckets, and give away, so that they know that there are other people who are not as well off as they are, and they give.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, definitely, to be thinking about that. And it's really interesting to see as well the types of things that the kids want to give to. And I think as they get older, they can really become more involved in really assessing organizations and how nonprofit organizations and how they're using that money. And that can be something that can grow and evolve with the kids as they become more mature. To the audience, we have a poll, so would love to hear your ideas on should the children receive an allowance if they're not required to do chores. So we have at least one. Oh, here we go. I think we have a lot of people who are in favor of chores. This is great to see. Love it. I think we can see that it's pretty heavy here, where people feel like, you know what, it should be a responsibility that the kids earn. And I would imagine, would love to see thoughts, if you would like to put them in the chat too, about that, if they're receiving their allowance based on chores. And I suppose that would be something where it would be taken away. You're not doing your chores, you're not getting your allowance. So great, really interesting to see that. Terrific. So let's move on to another set of questions. We've heard a little bit about modeling, and you know, there's a lot of, you can read all the books in the world, and you can, I think, educate kids with all of the different things that you're saying or things that they're learning in school. But I would love to hear from both of you, Barbara and Stacia, what's your point of view on the importance of modeling? You know, really, when it comes to it, at the end of the day, is that really what we should be focused on? And then as a parent, you know, certainly that does put a lot more pressure, I'll say personally, on me, sort of thinking about, oh, geez, I just kind of made an impulse buy. Have I just ruined my kids because they saw me spend money on something I didn't need? So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I'd be happy to address that. I think it's modeling is something that it has got this term associated with it. But I think if you think of modeling as everything you do in the course of a day, and it's kind of, it is a bit frightening to think about that everything you do, you say, your emotional displays, how you treat other people, what you, how you relate to others, your emotional displays, your, all of these kinds of things. Children are observing moment to moment, and there's really an indefinite number of opportunities for them to learn. And then to think that they learn day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. All of these things are learning experiences. So the example of, oh, I bought something I really wanted, if that's an unusual kind of thing, children will understand that. That's not a typical, I see something I want, I have to have it. So I think it's very sobering when you think that everything you do with your child, they're learning from. And so always do your best, because you want your children to emulate you in all of the right ways.
Yeah, Stacia, you're nodding your head. I'm wondering what you're thinking.
I totally agree. And as usual, I'll give you some examples. What we do and what I've done throughout in this town, in the city of Norwalk, and for some nonprofit organizations, I've taught their kids financial literacy using my book. And then at the end of the sessions with the kids over 6 or 8 weeks, we do a parent-child meeting where we would teach the parent with the kids sitting next to the parent. And we would have the parent do their income and expense and their cash flow, and take some homework, take home work, which is their balance sheet. It's amazing how the kids and the parents relate, because the kids never knew that the parents didn't have, or when they didn't have, or how they spent. So modeling is very important. I'll give you another example that recently happened, and this is a personal story. We lost our mom in August. So for Mother's Day, we had a Zoom call. And we had some relatives from England and the Caribbean, etc., on the Zoom call. And one young guy who grew up with us, he moved from a smaller island. We have the Grenadines and St. Vincent. He moved and stayed with us while he went to high school. And the things he told us that he learned from our mother, and from just looking at the relationship between my father and my mother, it was amazing. We were just so shocked at what he shared. So yes, modeling is very important, because you don't know what the kids pick up. If they talk to you, then you'd know what they're picking up, and it's really good for them to talk to you. But it's amazing what they pick up. The last thing, I took my young nephew, I have no kids, so I took my young nephew to school for 8 years, from the time he was 3 until he was 11. He called me one day and he said, I'm playing the same songs in my head that you played in your car. And I'm like, were you listening? He was listening. He was listening. So they listen, they see, they model. So modeling is very, very important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's amazing to me in terms of their memories. And my daughter will recount something to me that happened many, many years ago that I have absolutely no memory of. So they have those fresh young brains, and they're definitely absorbing. Again, to the audience, please do include questions that you may have. Would love to hear some of your thoughts. And before that, I'll ask another question. So we've heard a little bit about the importance of establishing goals. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from Stacia. Why don't we start with you this time to talk a little bit about the significance of setting goals? Is that something where we're talking about, as you were referring to before, sort of engaging the kids in the overall household goals? Is it their own goals? And maybe Barbara, you can touch on, I just think it's fascinating that your daughter said, I would prefer the mutual funds. So curious how that all sort of ended up for her, and is that something she's still doing? But why don't we start with Stacia, and would love to hear about the significance of goal setting.
We have to establish goals. So in families, I know lots of families just ride the waves, but with kids having to go to different schools and then go to college, because in this day and age, college is not an option. So we have these things that are coming up, whether we want to ignore them or not. The years pass, and if you have children, college is coming up, different things are coming up that you need money. So a lot of us do, and when I coach people and talk to young kids, I want them to think critically. So we do the 5 W's, the why, the what, the where, the when, the who. And we do the how, but we often forget the how much. We often forget to put some plan in place and say, well, this is going to be how much it's going to cost. And even though we're surprised when we get there, but at least if we put a goal and put a how much to the goal, plan money. Kids go to, at graduation, you have graduation ceremonies, you have dances, etc., etc. I usually let my teenagers plan their prom and plan the cost of their prom, and then who's going to fund it? Where's the money going to come from? So you start getting them planning and setting goals, and families should set goals. And as I say, add the how much when you set a goal. And then when you add the how much, it's how it's going to be funded. Saving, current monies, savings. Please not credit cards. If you have to credit card, but then you have to teach the kid how to pay down the credit card. So that's very, very important. And even at the teen level, in my Teen Money 101, I have a chapter on planning and setting goals. So I totally believe that if throughout kids, families should set goals, the parents, and then little kids, as they grow older, but definitely the teenagers should set goals and put a price to their goals.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Barbara, would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. As Stacy, I think you just outlined that so well about goal setting and such. And I think it's important throughout life with raising children that they do have expectations, that there is something like the cleaning up the yard or putting away one's toys with young children, or helping with putting dishes in the dishwasher if you have a dishwasher. I know when I was growing up, I one of 3 children, and one had to wash the dishes, one had to wipe the dishes, and one had to put them away. So I think, although I ended up more times than not being the dishwasher, and I don't think I was particularly appreciative of it at the time, but I think that was really important. That's important for you learn responsibility, you learn that this is important for the functioning of all and the wellness of all. And I think you can fold into that money and how that works. And, if you're writing out checks, I'm a dinosaur that way, I still do. Children watch that. And also I still put a date on the outside of the envelope. My daughter does that to this day. That's the date that it should be sent out by. Just to keep track of money. You have money until it's owed to someone else. So I think goal setting is just key. What are you doing this for? What are you hoping that children will take away from the experience?
And what about your daughter? How do you think this is starting with mutual funds so early in life? How did that influence her? And is it something you recommend?
I do. I think she's still, when she graduated from college, she got a very nice scholarship to go to college. And then I stopped contributing at that point. And she had, I don't know, she had $60,000 to $75,000.
Wow.
That was hers, her money.
Yeah.
So it was, I not that she followed this much over time, but, and it's not as if she didn't have responsibilities. I mean, just with her, she took on responsibilities without having that associated with an allowance. So,
Right.
Yeah, but she ended up with a lot of money.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about another concept here, which is we've talked about how children, some tips for how we should handle as parents or aunties or extended family giving money and allowances. But what about when they start going out into the world and they're earning their own money? How can we help them learn how to best manage that money with, of course, giving some level of autonomy, certainly, I suppose, since it is the money that they're earning, but also always that fine line in parenting. And when I say parenting, extending it out to aunts and uncles and grandmas and everybody, how, as important people in their lives, how might we help them think about how to manage this money that they're earning? I mean, Stacey, it makes me think of your niece and nephew, and can kind of imagine, like, there's one who may may have the paycheck spent before it's received, and the other who kind of tucks it away. And what are some of your thoughts there?
Well, actually, I just did their taxes this weekend. So they are now young adults. And I just did their taxes, and she is getting back a chunk of refunds. So I have to talk to her about that, because you don't wait until the end of the year to get all this refund. You probably need to change your allowances during this year. And he called me up to say he didn't expect to be paying, and could I check his W-2 again to make sure that he paid enough taxes, or I had the right tax amount there. And I was correct. He has to pay. So it continues. But, you know, they read the book and they understand, they commented, etc. But I think it's the practice. She has practiced. She has a plan. She has a really great job. I mean, I'm amazed at how much money she makes. She's into a business analyst with one of the top consulting companies, you know, so she's doing really well. Recently, he has had some downturns, and he has skipped and been out of jobs. Hopefully, he's on to the pandemic season has been really rough for him. But it's a matter, you have to talk to these people, to these kids, whether they're teenagers or youths, as my nephew and nieces are, and what they're going through, really. So how do you teach them? You should take some time out and sit down with them when they start earning money, and we do the same buckets. You have to save something. What are your goals? What do you want? You know, you may need a very expensive iPhone or something that your parents used to pay for. Now you need to pay for that. You need to pay some of the cable bill or whatever. You need to participate with a percentage based on how much money you're making. But we need to teach these youngsters that lesson. And the other thing, example today, the young nephew who went to Boston College, he's now a big attorney with a big company, and he's just bought a bigger house than mine, bigger pool, bigger everything than mine. And I'm like, you go from starter house to mid house, you don't go to end house. He just went to end house, and he has always been really good with money. He would go shopping, he'd buy nothing on sale, and I'd end up paying the bill when he had money. So, those are different folks in my family, and how you teach them and how they learn to, by practicing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for that. Barbara, what do you think?
Oh, I concur with that, and I completely, Stacey. I was thinking, you know, just to go back to modeling again. I mean, if you buy everything personally on a credit card or that, it's, you know, children see that, young adults see that, and it's important again to have those conversations with children about them paying the credit card bill and not getting overextended. I know my daughter tends to be the cash only kind of person. She doesn't like to owe money. This is the same one with the mutual funds story too. So it's interesting, but a lot of this you can influence your children and their relationship with money by letting them know what your relationship with money is and the things that you think are important. And I like that savings, spending, and giving model myself. I think that's a very balanced approach. It doesn't have to be strictly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that it's effective, just as sort of a training tool. Let's talk a little bit about debt. And we understand, certainly as adults, as a country, that there can be very helpful and important ways that we should use debt and take advantage of debt. And one of the reasons why we wanted to put together this conversation was simply because when you look at, you know, you have this child who, like I said, you sort of blink your eyes and your daughter or your niece or your nephew all of a sudden is a preteen, and then all of a sudden they're an adolescent, and they're being faced with a decision that, short of, you know, their future mortgage, looking at their university and in the investment, you're asking a really relatively young person who isn't fully, even from an executive functioning perspective, isn't really fully complete in terms of their development, asking them to be making decisions about their university, which at this point is such a massive investment. So what are some of your thoughts about, I bring that up vis-a-vis debt because you could be making, you know, choices where you could be choosing university that's going to be putting the child, young adult, in debt or not, or to varying degrees. What are some of your thoughts about teaching about debt and sort of leverage and specifically as it relates to thinking about that through and the investment in education? I'll just open it to whoever wants to answer.
Yeah, and this brings to mind something. I just met a young family this weekend. One of my best classes for teenagers has been where I had youths going to college, and I had one youth who was in an apprenticeship. And that day, that was one of my best classes. I had it at a church in Brooklyn. That day, I flipped the class to have a debate on college versus apprenticeship. And the guy who was doing the apprenticeship, he won out because he was doing an apprenticeship, so he was going to be an electrician. He already was getting money, getting paid. He had no debt, college debt. And when he was done the apprenticeship, he moved straight into a job. And we know that if we have an electrician come to our house, we have to pay them $200 to just visit. And then we pay them. So I go back to with youths, apprenticeship, if you're handy, if you want to be handy, an apprenticeship, or going to the college, the cost of college. Because the young nephew I just mentioned today, who is the attorney, he went to Boston College, Fordham University, you know, he went to places where he had to pay. So he has a lot of debt. He's making a lot of money, but has a lot of debt. So we talk about that, and then we throw in community college in the middle. And I would, in this day and age with youth having so much debt and the jobs they can't have because of pandemic, etc., I would suggest that people send their kids to community college and then go to a 2-year. Sorry, Michelle, I know this is Pace University and we're on Pace's platform, but we have to be really rational. If you can't afford and you don't have enough scholarships, then you do community college, especially if community college becomes free. I mean, we're not on a political platform, but if that happens, so that's my take on that.
Yeah, and Michelle, you may have a comment on this or not, but what I would say from my own personal experience is that, you know, it doesn't even have to be an and or, right? Community college can be a great launching point to then get into a PACE university where maybe you wouldn't even qualify for acceptance into PACE University and or have the finances for it, but community college can be a great starting point to then go into PACE. I don't know, Michelle, if you
that's true. That's true. And in the last few years, PACE has actually developed some relationships with Westchester Community College, Rockland Community College, and I think possibly Dutchess Community to have their students kind of transfer to us more easily. Once they're done with their 2-year degree, I think they've smoothed out the process a bit. There's also, for some folks, there's some scholarship opportunity for the folks coming from the community colleges when they're coming over to PACE. So that's definitely something that we've looked at too, in terms of, maximizing the potential of those students who definitely want to get a 4-year degree, but are making the decision to do a 2-year school, a 2-year degree at community college first for those savings, and then coming to us. And there might be some financial incentive to come to us through that route as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, Barbara, I'm sure you'd like to weigh in.
Yes. I'm just concurring with with all of you. I think most things financial, it really helps to talk this through with children, and not when they're a senior in high school, but to start that conversation early. I know some parents who have fostered their child's athletic ability so they can get on a swim team or a soccer team or get an athletic scholarship. But I think all of these things just factor into children's thinking, so that when it does come down to exactly where you're going to go to school or what your options are, you know what the consequences are to your decisions. And I know I directed the doctoral program in psychology for over 3 decades, and students there came out of the education with, $200,000 debt on occasion. I mean, that's not everyone, of course, but in a few years they were able to pay that off really quite easily. So it's, but there are lots of things to think about with that. There's a lot of flexibility in that job in the end, and yet it does cost a lot to get there.
So, Gina, that this brings up the planning, the goals, setting goals, and understanding, and putting a price to the goals. So it's the whole flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even, I think, having those very structured conversations, and like we're saying, not waiting until they're teenagers to start having these conversations, so they can sort of, as they grow, they can mature their own thinking and be able to handle these types of conversations. So we just have a few minutes left. If anybody has a question, please do put it in the chat. I'd like it to open it up to our panelists. Is there anything else that you were wishing we had time to touch on that you'd like to share with the audience or each other?
I'd say thank goodness for conversations and presentations like this. There was nothing like this when I was raising my children. And I think the more talking about it and thinking about it, it really will facilitate their financial literacy.
My comment is, in the communities that I teach, the nonprofit areas and city areas with mayors, etc., we have sometimes parents who come at the end of the program. But as we said, it's a program that the parents have to teach their kids because it's not done in schools. So I wish that parents would be advocates to this being taught in schools, because it's so critical. And that's why my passion, I see so many women, 70% of the world's women, who don't have financial literacy education. And some of us, we are financially literate, but not financially well. So I think, Michelle, I haven't done this. I did this on the University of the West Indies platform, talking about financial wellness. And then it was really, really popular that we did a second session, particularly in my country, the country I'm from, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are facing a vicious volcano right now that's going to really collapse the whole economy, etc. And that this probably would be a good time to start people thinking, because you have to start over. But people need to pause and really assess their situation and go forward. Until you pause and watch your situation, nothing is going to happen. So the only other thing to build out here would be just what do you focus on? How do you start? My call to action would be to put a budget together, have a non-spending month where you write down everything that you spent for food, etc. But a month where you don't buy any wants, just needs, and then look at it analytically and say, hey, I can do this more often. Things like that, just some practical things and probably Barbara, for your when you have your parents groups, etc., where does financial literacy fit?
Yeah, I think that's such a great idea, because the non-spending month and tracking, I recently was listening to an interview on NPR with a family who did that because of COVID, really unexpectedly losing a job. And they just commented on, they couldn't believe how much money was just flying out the door with, especially nowadays with all of these online subscriptions that you kind of forget that you have. And, you know, I can say personally, I've got one I keep that I, for my daughter, for some game that I keep meaning to cancel, and or, you know, all of the multiple streaming services, kind of looking at that and saying, do we really need to have, you know, 5 different streaming services? And so I think that's a really great idea. So Barbara, I think I'll pass it to you for final words, and then Michelle, I think we'll be a wrap. And thanks for the thumbs up, Margaret.
We actually do have a question.
Oh, we
in the
do?
chat. What resources do
Great.
you suggest for learning financial literacy?
Well, I have to say, I went on the FDIC website, which was so interesting. I was really looking for materials about financial literacy, and they have a whole developmental set of really like curriculum materials for different age groups. That is really quite impressive.
Oh, great.
So I'm going to show my book on teen money for teenagers. So you guys have my information behind me. So this has been tried and true. We've been teaching this for 10 years in nonprofits, churches, and we also do a lot of adults too. So I'm off to adults, especially during the pandemic. And Gina, after this session is done, I'm gonna cancel Architectural Digest. It just hit my credit card for much more money than I expected, so I'm gonna cancel it as soon as we're done here. Yes. It's not worth it. Okay, I just thought I'd mention that.
That's great. This is I don't know if you can see, this is the opposite of Spoiled that I've been reading in terms of the spend, save, and give. And I should have had it at my desk. I have another book in another room that's just come out recently that really talks about how to get kids involved in investing right away. So there's definitely resources out there.
Yeah. And the different pieces, I focus on literacy. Let's understand first, put plans together, and then you can go on to something else. And recently, I did a program called the CEO of Your Household. It's how adults manage their households.
Well, thank you all so much. Barbara, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Well, I was just going to say that it's such an important topic, and there are only 6 states in the country that require financial literacy as part of the curriculum. And that's not good. I mean, we're graduating a lot of kids who have no clue about money, and that's no way to grow up. So I think the more we can do, the better.
Great point, thank you. Well, I would personally like to thank Gina for coming up with the idea for this session. We were talking about something else with the Alumni Engagement Committee, and she brought up her twins and the disparity between, how do you teach the same information and have people process it differently? And we thought it was a really interesting topic. So thank you, Stacia and Barbara, for joining us and going along with this idea. I think it was really interesting. Hope it was helpful for all of you who tuned in. As I said, this is our last finance series for this semester. Please keep an eye out for emails that are coming out about next semester when we start up in September again. And also for those of you who are interested, on June 3rd, we're having our alumni reunion. We're celebrating classes ending in 0s, 1s, 5s, and 6s because we're celebrating last year's folks as well as this year's honorees, but it's open to all alumni. And we're doing a panel, a back to class session at noon about new health technology with some professors from the College of Health Professions and from the Seidenberg School about remote health technology and how that's helping some underserved communities and also senior citizens, which is pretty interesting stuff, and a lot of their research, which is AI and all kinds of cool things. And that evening, we're doing a Family Feud style game show event online called Survey Says. So if you're interested in that, you can just go to our alumni website and look for the reunion information and join us for that. You don't have to be celebrating a reunion to join us. It's just for folks to get together and have some fun. But thank you all so much for sharing your expertise with us, and to the rest of you for joining us.
Thank you
Have a
very
great summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.